Rick, thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a little bit different to our previous conversations because we're gonna take a sort of Warhammer Film Club approach to this one and just explore some of the influences from the worlds of films and television that have sort of played a bit of a role, an inspirational role in some way, have influenced in some way the creation of Warhammer and 40k over the years.
Yeah. Interesting concept.
Sure.
Yeah, I've got to try and remember. It's a long time ago.
And I will be honest, this whole thing is because I love Warhammer and I also love films, so it's just a good excuse for me to talk about both. Basically,
well, that's good. You're probably much more expert than I am in both. Which is a bit strange, isn't it? Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I think just put it into context. You have to remember that I was born in 1959. So I was probably the first what you call TV generation. So I grew up, and I don't think we got a TV in the house until I was, 4 or 5 or something. But I always remember there being a TV, black and white,
right,
quite little in the corner. The picture would roll a bit like this sometimes. You have to bang it on the top. That later influenced my attitude to technology in the 40k universe. Bang, bang, damn curse, make the appropriate curse, and it will work. But TVs were temperamental things in those days. We got a colour TV rented in sometime in the 1970s. So I would have been mid-teenager.
Right.
So before then, the world was black and white.
Sure.
We used to guess what colour things were by the shade of black and white, the shade of grey. There was a particular shade of grey that you knew was red, that sort of thing, which was helpful when watching the snooker. Yeah. It was a different world. So I grew up with that, and film was always. In those days, you didn't see films on TV until after quite a long time. They'd been out for quite a long time. So we did still go to the cinema, but we weren't really big cinema buffs. I think this previous generation, my parents, born in the 1930s, they were big cinema buffs as kids.
Right.
Because it was what they did. Every Saturday they'd go to the cinema. I think where they're from in Lincoln, there might have been something like a dozen cinemas.
Right.
That many, relatively small town, dozen. Might have been one more, but it got bombed by the Luftwaffe in World War II.
Right.
It was the only casualty of the city was to suffer, was one of the cinemas.
Right.
But there were two three technically when I was a kid, and then one got knocked down and turned into a Primark, as it is now, and then we'd left two. I don't know even if there are any now. They're probably more. They modernise them, don't they?
Sure. Yeah.
But and we'd occasionally go and we'd see whatever was the latest film, the Bond film or whatever. But other than that, we weren't really massive sort of film goers. It was more to do with whatever was on TV, to be honest.
Sure. So what kind of stuff were you watching on TV?
Yeah, I think watching TV was almost what everyone did in the sort of in the 60s and 70s. It was kind of like, I don't know. I remember Richard Halliwell dragging me away from the TV. Go, let's play a game. It's 2 Ronnies is on, Because when it's on, it won't ever be on again. It's not as if if you don't catch Monty Python or if you don't catch the goodies or whatever it was, you won't be on again for God knows how long.
Yeah.
No video recorders. They came out in the 80s. Late 70s sort of, but people didn't routinely have home video recorders until the 80s.
Yeah.
And then at college, there were film clubs and things like that. So I did, see sort of things. I remember going to all-night sessions at the when I was at college, where they basically hire 4 or 5, no, probably more, half a dozen of films, and project them out, in the big hall.
Right.
And people would take sleeping bags, and you'd sort of watch a film, sleep through a film, watch another film. And dawn would arrive, and you'd stagger back and go to bed. I do remember doing that sort of thing. But as to in terms of what influences you and what doesn't, I mean, everything influences you, doesn't it? From you're a product of your environment, and that was the environment I grew up in. So to some extent, I would have. I'd remember films and TV or whatever, and they got translated over into Warhammer. When we were doing the original Warhammer, and in fact, when I was doing the original 40k, there's a huge element of not taking it entirely seriously, which I think came from that kind of. It's like a student or mentality to some extent. It's a student humour, and particularly Richard Halliwell and me growing up. I mean, we were kind of we'd listen to the radio as much as anything. The radio was you had things like "I'm sorry, I'll read that again," which was the precursor to "I'm sorry, I haven't a clue." Which people like John Cleese, Bill Oddie, Graham Gordon, Tim Brooke Taylor, all those sort of people, who would then be reincarnated on TV as Monty Python. Monty Python, The Goodies, and why don't you switch off your television set and do something more interesting instead? Abbreviated to Why Don't You, which was a children's program, but it had Michael Palin in and some of these guys. It was very surreal.
Right.
Yeah. The Bonzo Dog Doodle Band
Right.
as the main guests, which is Viv Stanshall. Hilarious. They're all part of the same sort of people, the same sort of surreal sort of sense of humour. And I think that surreal sense of humour was something we brought back into Warhammer and 40k.
Yeah, because the Monty Python-ness of it all definitely feels like there is an element of that finds its way into, and it might not, obviously there's Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Then there's later Terry Gilliam movies as well, like Jabberwocky, which feel quite like they've got a Warhammer-ness to them.
Yeah. Well, and visually too, they're quite Warhammer, aren't they? That dirty medieval film you get in Jabberwocky, which is a great film, and Time Bandits to some extent.
Right. Yeah.
Later on, we Monty Python and the Holy Grail, much more silly. But, I think we quite liked silly, and some of the Warhammer characters are a bit silly. I remember describing one of the characters in the Samurai Army set, I think it was, that we did for the first edition of Warhammer. It might have been Forces of Fantasy supplement. I remember describing one of the samurai overlords being so frustrated that he couldn't destroy or take a city by siege, that he committed ritual suicide by standing on his head in a bucket of water. Things like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's the anyway. They just came across it, and if you read some of the stuff Hal wrote, Hal often did scenarios for the Warhammer. So he did Magnificent Sven. He did the original Redway River Valley one for Warhammer, and then for the second edition he did the Magnificent Sven, which is great. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a classic Hal thing is someone's actions be motivated by something which other people don't understand, but which then when the original perpetrator perceives, he kind of goes along with. And the whole idea of a troll slayer is a bit like that. So the whole idea of a troll, which is Hal's invention, the whole idea of a troll slayer is that a dwarf frustrated in love or otherwise down on his luck, he reaches the point where he thinks there's no point in going on. I'll go out and I'll die a heroic death at the hands of a large and vicious monster. The larger and vicious, the better. I'll go and do it. And of course, the troll slayer is born. The troll slayer goes out, manages to kill the troll, and comes back and goes, "Oh no, I managed to get terrible." Does he want to die or doesn't he? Of course he doesn't.
Yeah.
He becomes this conflicted. His entire personality is based on this conflicted thing. It's this cognitive dissonance.
Sure. Yeah.
And how that was how. How was that character?
Right.
He once accidentally said in conversation, "I'll burn that bridge when I come to it." I said, "You will have, you will." He did. That was hell. And I think some of that comes across
Mm,
in the nature of things in the Warhammer universe.
mm.
Yeah, he invented the was it Kemlo the Slan?
Yes.
That might have been part of the same scenario actually.
Yeah, I think so.
The Magnificent Sven scenario. Yeah, Kemlo the Slan, where this small frog-like human, this frog creature, is washed up in a the old wicker basket and the Moses story, and is adopted by a family who can't have their own children. In fact, it's a giant frog. It's
Yeah.
good. No, we won't think about the fact he's a giant frog. We'll just bring him up as our own. So you have this character who's a giant frog,
Yeah.
but thinks he's a Viking, and everyone goes along with it. Yeah, it's how.
I mean, 'cause it's in like Magnificent Sven, obviously, even being a play on Magnificent Seven as well, right? So,
Yeah,
like it's on even just on the face of it, it is just straight up like a
yeah, and the
humorous.
story is based on it as well.
Sure, yeah.
The great hero will sort of save the community.
Mm,
Yeah, and so those things were sort of embedded within the culture. It wasn't that we were particularly keen on getting the film references in; they were just there in your head,
mm,
and easily parodied. And I think to some extent, the things we were ourselves parodying were parodies. Like I often say, a lot of the character of halflings in Warhammer is more to do with Lord of the Rings than Lord of the Rings,
mm.
which is sort of true. I made them larcenous and a little bit shifty,
Right.
which they're not. They're not really in Lord. It's the idea of Bilbo being a thief in The Hobbit, and then that gets picked up in Lord of the Rings, and they are turned into genuine thieves and ne'er-do-wells, and
Mm,
just carried it across. Yeah, but there's that sort of thing, and
mm.
that general feel of that Middle European Gothic quality that I brought to the Warhammer world. I just picked that up, because it's all the horror films and the Hammer House of Horror films. It was just a standard trope. I wasn't copying or being inspired by any particular film. Just that idea, and the whole Peter Cushing vibe, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I still love to this day.
Did you watch a lot of Hammer films then?
Yeah, they were on TV,
Right.
often late at night, and my parents wouldn't watch them because they're scary.
Mm.
So they'd be on at 11 o'clock at night or something. So I'd be a teenager, and I'd go, "Oh, I'm going to watch that. It's so scary," because they're not scary at all, really. But if you think they are, they are.
Yeah.
And there was nothing else comparable in the day. So yeah, I kind of like that vibe. I think it's quite something.
Mm,
And I think they do seasons on TV, and often you get some. Oh, I can't remember, some film book. Wouldn't be was it Barry Norman? It wouldn't be Barry Norman. It'd be somebody doing a bit of an intro to the whole series, because they
mm.
were by then quite classic. I think it started in the 1950s and went through. And Hammer did stuff all the way through into the 1970s, and the later stuff was a little bit more interesting. I think one of the
Right.
things I particularly, I think I mentioned to you earlier, was Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter,
Right.
where you get people picking up on that same kind of vibe for a sort of a vampire hunter story. And that was really quite cool. It was intended to be a pilot for a series, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, but he's got a role playing kind of character to it, where the Captain Kronos character and his sidekick, the Hunchback sidekick, turn up at a village, and they rescue the girl who's going to be burnt as a witch, I think, and they do down the vampire baddies,
Mm.
and then go off into the distance in search of new adventure together. Oh, it made a great series, but I don't think they ever did anything with it. It's a shame, really.
It's quite flamboyant and quite over the top as well, isn't it?
It's a little bit camp,
Yeah.
I suppose, is what you'd say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But everything was then. We didn't worry about that. I mean, God, we had Jason King on TV, Peter Wingard. I mean, you don't get much more camp than that.
Right.
That's fantastic.
Were there any other Hammer films that stood out as being particularly that had those kind of archetypes and those kind of visuals that would imprint themselves on you?
I'm trying to think. Trying to think. I did make a few notes. Can't think of any in particular.
Dracula is one that you've mentioned
That's
before.
the first. I say Dracula et al. Because Dracula, that was the first one, 1958,
Right.
I think.
Right.
But then they all go through until the Bride of da da da. You end up with vampire lovers and things like that,
Sure.
where it gets a little bit more racy.
Sure. Yes.
I don't think that was on TV. Yeah, yeah. But they're all pretty much in the same vein. And then there have been spin-offs and imitators ever since.
Yeah.
It's like the whole genre has been. It just created a genre, didn't it? And to some extent, that was what I was picking up on. But it's the Middle European sort of thing that I kind of quite liked. It was a Never Never Land, the Black Forest, and the town where you turn up, where there's a small community, and the castle on the hill. It's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's very Warhammer. There's an element of that for sure.
Yeah, and then you don't want to get lost in the forest and the werewolves and that kind of element of it. That I just took that across, and that's why I made the Warhammer world basically the Empire, Germanic. I didn't really intend it to be German. I intended it to have that element, that sort of feel. When the guys took over and did all the when the guys from TSR, Phil and co, took over and they did all the supplements for Warhammer, because they did, and that's what made Warhammer Fantasy Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay so great. It wasn't actually the original game per se; it was those brilliant supplements that were done for it, and which I had nothing to do with really. And they took the Germanic thing a little bit further, made it more German than I'd intended. But they were linguists. Phil was certainly a linguist.
Right.
And they had some fun with it. And I think they started using sort of real German to name things. I think there's one place that was called Flat. They took names which were quite improbable, but meant something in German and turned them into gags. Sure. You'd have to speak German to get.
Yeah, which I guess wasn't a problem until you were translating the.
Yeah, it did become a bit of a problem. Well, even the core character. I think the core character was a prince in the original, and I made him the emperor later on, was Karl Franz. And the Germans, when they were translating it, said to me, Karl Franz, it sounds a bit like Peter Kevin to us. It doesn't have a resonance.
Right.
I said, well, can't help that. It's the name. And some of the names, Altdorf is a real place, I think. But some of the names didn't quite. They have a resonance in English as Germanic, but they don't have a resonance in German as Germanic.
Isn't it interesting?
There's inevitable. We had the same with France, and we had this when we did the French pieces. In fact, the odd thing I did, I think it was something we did for the Dark Elf book, where the French got in a bit of a tiz because something we'd written, which was a name which sounded perfectly good and innocent to us, meant something quite rude in French.
Right. Well, I'm sure people will be scouring their Dark Elf Armies book for that then.
Yes.
After listening to this. Was there anything else in because the Warhammer world in particular has a feel of, there's always a certain horror around the corner in Warhammer, I think.
I suppose so. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any. I think those things tended to arrive second hand, if anything.
Right.
I don't remember any particular film or films that have got a lot of that going on. With 40k, I mean, I think the vibe for that, a lot of the vibe for that came from 2000 AD.
Right.
And Dune. People accuse me of ripping off, quote, Dune. And then they accuse me of ripping off, quote, 2000 AD. Well, the truth of it is I also ripped off a lot of other things while I was at it. So many things. Hard to say what I ripped off,
Right.
And I wouldn't have said this when I was at Games Workshop, ever, because I think it would have been difficult for them to live with. But I'll say it now. I mean, one of the things I ripped off when I did 40k was the Bible.
Right.
I mean, the emperor is essentially Christ. It's an eternal self-sacrifice to save the savior of mankind. And the relationship he has and the emperor has with the Imperium and the people within it is essentially that between. You look at the sort of Catholic Church, and you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and you've got the spirit of the emperor, and you've got the sort of dreamy emperor, and it has a strong religious parallel.
Sure.
And the same is true in Dune, actually. So Dune picked up on that sort of Christian background.
Sure.
All those things. The Dune film was quite influential in terms of. I can't remember that one. It might even have been after 40k, to be honest. But because 40k went on after I'd written it, so as it developed, it picked up on some of the things that were happening in film at the time. Gene Stealers being they must have been. That must have been before 40k. Cause, Gene Stealers really is inspired by aliens to some extent.
Right.
But the original role of Gene Stealers in the 40k universe was a very small one. I just put them in as an incidental. And then they got picked up on in Space Hulk and made the physicality of them became closer to Gene Stealers.
Sure.
To aliens.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a Gene Stealers aliens thing going on.
Yeah. It definitely looks that way because they're quite different in the rogue. Like when you first conceived of them for Rogue Trader, they're more like, as much as they're sort of vampires in space in terms of the way they act, they look quite odd. They're quite an odd kind of gribbly monster,
like a leech like face. They were, but the idea still came from aliens, I think.
Right.
And we had a book on the Alien film, the first film, a book of. It was all the stuff that Geiger did for it,
right?
All the concept work and everything, and what they thought, their thinking behind the concept work, and which didn't really come across in the film, but was really interesting, and I think we picked up on a lot of that.
Right.
It was quite fun, but at the end of the day, the film was quite influential. I think the way was it the Colonial Marines?
Yeah.
The way was it in the second film? I can't remember.
Sure, yeah, in the second film, Aliens.
With the armour and everything, I think that was somewhat copied when we did the Cadians. You can't escape the influence to some extent. It's because people would have seen the films. And I think the other thing you have to bear in mind is that sometimes somebody would have made a range of toy soldiers in the past that was based on something that we didn't know what it was based on, and then you kind of look at that and you copy it. So you're copying something third hand. Sure. Without necessarily knowing what it is you're copying. And there's quite a bit of that went on in the early days. But I think Aliens is the obvious, more obvious one. There are a few references to other things throughout 40k. I mean, when we did the Catachan Jungle Fighters, they're plainly based on the Rambo movies.
Right.
It's got that kind of imagery to it, hasn't it? I mean, that was deliberate. Because we wanted something that had a resonance that people would say, "Oh, I recognise what that thing is," and they were hugely popular. The Cadians and the Catachan were both massively popular, and we did a whole variety of those things at the time because we weren't sure which image was going to be the most potent.
Sure, right. So all the different, like the Valhallans and
what people would like. And we thought if we gave a variety, then people could choose.
Right.
And none of them were unpopular. They all had a following. The Valhallans were like the most World War II. World War II Russian-ish, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the brief. And there was, I can't remember what they were now. There was some that were a little bit more Victorian and formal.
Sure.
I can't remember the name. You might know. Somebody will know.
Yeah, I mean, because there were the Talons as well. There was the Steel Legion.
Did they come a bit later? I can't remember.
And there was Praetorians came later.
Yeah, and there was the the Rough Riders,
Rough Riders, yeah.
yeah, which were sort of vaguely Cossackish.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So we were just going for those kind of things. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that the Catachans would be so will want. I mean, they're a very strong visual identity, I suppose, isn't it? It's quite a powerful look that they've got.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was quite useful in a way because it meant that Perrys could make stuff that was useful for. They didn't like doing fantasy or science fiction
Right.
uh, much at all. They'd kind of grown out of it, I think, by then. So they really only wanted to make historical figures, and the figures we were making were getting less and less like historical figures. So they did a lot of the Empire stuff because it's based on Landscape, 16th century sort of imagery. But then when it came to doing 40k, there wasn't anything that was obviously historical that they could reference. So making those was a quite a useful thing for them because it meant that there was a historical reference there that they could pick up on. Yeah, we did all right with those. So it was kind of influenced 40k, but at the end of the day, I think 40k, even though it was that big mishmash, I did take ideas from anywhere and everywhere. It became its own thing. It became an original thing, and that thing had a definite character that people could pick up on and relate to, as the current generation of Games Workshop people seem to have focused on. I mean, the thing that they're deeply focused on, to the exclusion of everything else, is that thing. It is that character, and it is very distinct.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's true for both for Warhammer Fantasy and for 40k. There is a lot of. It seems to me that there's obviously, like you say, there's a lot of influences, all sorts of influences, really. They're all going into the mix together with you and Hal and other writers, and then it's what emerges, the product of all of that, like that concoction, is kind of more than the sum of its own parts. The character is this other thing that emerges from a
Yes.
combination of all these different influences.
Yeah, the cake is in the baking, not in the ingredients to some extent.
Yeah.
And once that's identified, I think other people that can then pile in say, this thing which exists in the real world would work in this context, where it's appropriate, and we can build on that and so on. So all these things may well have played their part, and sometimes they're just a gag.
Sure.
And don't have any part to play in the greater evolution of the games or the background. I think one of the things I did in 40k was I created an Inquisitor who was called Cluson van Sherlock or something.
Yeah.
I just threw in every name of every COD detective that I could remember from TV or films or whatever.
Sure.
Just to hammer the point home what this was. And I think there was a sort of Doctor Who-ish kind of character as well that got. And sometimes what happened to be the artist would bring in these references, and you'd kind of then have to sort of accommodate them within the with background, if only in a caption.
Sure.
A lot of the very original 40k stuff, the artwork could just turn up and it was mad. It didn't have any real relationship to what was going on in the game, and I had to kind of construct something around it to bring it into context. That's why there's that section in the back of the original Rogue Trader book on Carl Critchlow drew it, called Far Reach, I think, or something. The little almost like a section.
This was the Eye of Terror, right? The Logan's Logan's World, I think.
Yeah, it might have been.
Is that right?
I think Logan's World something else. I think it was called.
But there was a load of Carl Critchlow images of like a biker, kind of dusty
right at the back, and it's why it was all at the back.
Right.
Because we might have turned up late, but also I couldn't. What am I going to do with this? It's got absolutely no relationship. It's almost like he'd just been sent a batch of models and told to do some drawings.
Right.
Which I think is what happened.
Right.
And so I had to kind of invent I almost like invented a sub thing for it. Necromunda-like, really, or Gorka Morka-like. It's a subset of the world. but that was bringing in a bit of Mad Max imagery.
Sure,
Well,
yes.
you do get a lot of that in 40k. That's sort of, I can't remember whether, because the original Mad Max film didn't have a lot of that imagery. That imagery became that sort of crazy biker gang punk stuff. That was the second film, really, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. The first one's a lot more grounded. It's
It's a lot more
still
trad.
broadly, I think, is a post-apocalyptic society, but it's a much closer.
Yeah,
It's much sooner after the breakdown of order a little. So
it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a bit more normal in many ways.
it is. Yeah, you still have the. I think the character is still a policeman in effect,
Yes.
although he's
Yeah.
trying to. It's a Judge Dredd type environment,
Yeah.
where everything's sort of breaking down, and they still have a standard police car, albeit the last of the V8 Interceptors.
Sure.
But it's a police car. And then later on, you get to Beyond the Thunderdome and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy mad stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that crazy mad stuff was way Warhammer and 40k. But I'm not sure which came first.
Hmm.
It was obviously something in the air. That kind of punky post-apocalypse sort of vibe.
Yeah.
And you say you get a lot of that as well. And it's a sort of natural thing to pick up on, really. Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything current. Well, then I wouldn't know because I'm old and don't do these sort of. Haven't been to the cinema in years.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I find that, like you say, it's in the air. I, I'm very interested in that kind of pop culture, the sort of movements, the ebbs and flows and the tides, because I think you're right. There's a lot of stuff that feeds into, like, things that feed into one another and take
Yeah,
influence and give influence and kind of, you do get multiple projects will come out in quick succession that are kind of tapping into similar visuals or ideas and sort of exploring it in similar ways.
yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, and I think 40k itself has become influential in a
Mm,
broader cultural sense. So you only have to look at some of the imagery on films and TV, and you go, well, that's very. I mean, it just is. It's just very 40k.
oh, massively so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's obviously been taken from it. Yeah, I mean the Starship Troopers movie. You look at that and you go, well, that's more 40k than is the book. For the book, it's not. The
Sure.
book was influential in its own way, particularly in creating second hand because people made toy soldiers based on the book
Mm,
that then became part of something that we would have used as kids, and then developed the idea of armored suits, Terminator armor or whatever, and the Space Marine armor is sort of a relationship of that.
mm.
But the actual film, nothing to do with that at all. The film has the Starship Troopers look like Cadians,
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
and the all the bugs look like Tyranids,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they are Tyranids.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, well, that's not the case in the book. It's quite different, really.
Mm,
Yeah, so yeah, and the other thing I like about that film as well, it's got that biting sense of satire within it, which
sure.
actually is quite was original as 40k was conceived. At least it's quite in the same spirit,
Yeah.
which is unusual, really.
Yeah. Yeah, because it definitely goes into a place of, I mean, Starship Troopers in particular is very much about that
Yeah,
world and the militaristic world and the way in which they approach their problems and everything is a nail because they are a hammer and all that
yeah,
sort of stuff, right?
yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and expendability of people as well is a bit
Sure.
grim. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and being in it for the species.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 It is fascinating. I mean, there were a couple of other things that you'd mentioned to me previously that I was quite intrigued by. So there's the Charlton Heston film, The Warlord.
yeah, it's got a bit of a fantasy vibe to it. A lot. I've not seen that for a long time,
Right.
but I remembered it. I remember it as being something that was quite influential. It's set in something like I think it's the 11th century,
Right.
so it's got that kind of slightly grubby, dark age feel to it. And Charlton Heston I think he's appointed to the lordship of a sort of swamp infested nightmare area that he has to go in and sort of sort out. And I seem to remember there's a bit of witch burning involved as well. It's got that sort of grim quality to it, which is interesting. And the other one, which is similar, set much later in the 30 Years' War, is a Michael Caine film called The Lost Valley, which is a lot more Empire in character because they're all wearing this sort of 17th century kit, with big helmets and sort of spikes on them, things like that. And again, it's a kind of mercenary band turns up at a sort of isolated community. It tends to be that isolated communities in the middle of war or in the middle of something horrible going on. It's a sort of interesting character. But the imagery in that's nice. It's got some sort of quite cool if you get a chance to see it. One of Michael Caine's. Actually, I think I could be mistaken, but I think he was particularly proud of that as a piece of acting.
Right.
I think he goes back and says he flopped them. It was a complete loss at the box office.
Right.
But I think he was quite proud of it as a piece of work.
Just like going back around to the horror side of things as well. Would films like the Witchfinder General and the Wicker Man, were they
that same sort of thing, aren't they? They've got that sort of thing going on. I wouldn't particularly have had that in my head. But
right.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Is that Oliver Reed?
It's Vincent Price is in
Vincent Price. Oh, okay.
Witchfinder General. Yeah, Oliver Reed was in the Devils though, the Ken Russell film, which feels quite Warhammer-esque as well. Yeah. Well, it's got it's 17th century really, but it's got Warhammer kind of has that vibe going, doesn't it? Even when I did Warhammer roleplay, it's very obvious that although it was sort of late medieval, it was going into a kind of Renaissance period with some later elements like highwaymen. Right.
Being more of you have highwaymen in medieval periods, but the concept of a highwayman is, you think of a highwayman, it's a guy with a mask, a tricorn, and a pistol, isn't it? Yeah. And we wanted to seize those cliches by the throat. Doing this sort of thing. Sure. So you have that. All of those. They've got that kind of vibe going for them, haven't they? And would we have seen those films or been aware of them? I'd say I can't actually remember.
There's a lot of religious hysteria in the Devils that feels quite
as there is in the Lost Valley, because it's set in the 30 Years' War, which was a sectarian conflict. Right. So you have a lot of that sort of thing going on. I mean, The Name of the Rose. Right. Have you seen the film?
I've not seen the film, or in fact read the book, but it's on my list.
Oh well, the book's fantastic. The film is very, very good. Right. I'm amazed I've forgotten that one. Actually, The Name of the Rose is pure Warhammer because it's about that religious conflict and heresy, and there's quite a lot of witch burning in that, and as well as murder and secret books, libraries. It's almost there's always an element of magic in it, even though it's a historical back setting. Right. And the character, although it's played by Sean Connery, is Brother Baskerville, and he's plainly based on Sherlock Holmes. Right. He is Sherlock Holmes in a medieval context. Yeah, which no one accused Umberto Eco of ripping off Conan Doyle, but nonetheless, plainly is.
But that's the beauty of that kind of inspiration, though, isn't it? Because you can take something, an idea from something else, or an influence from something else, and then put it through your own, filter it through your own sort of perspective, your own concepts, and then apply it to something new. Yeah, and create a third thing, like quite a magical thing.
Yeah, which in fact he called him Brother Baskerville as well. He made the borrowing obvious.
Yeah, very on the nose there.
Yeah.
Although speaking of, I mean, that Sly Marbo being a character in 40k definitely shares a certain...
I don't know who did that, but yeah, again, different people have different things in, and sometimes a character will be invented and there'll be a reference to the name, and that I won't have got because it'd be something I've not noticed, or not aware of. I think Sly Mobo being a sort of Sylvester Stallone character. Yeah. Jervis pointed out another one to me as well. It's a sort of one of the Dark Elf characters is sort of inspired by Cruella de Vil. Right. But I thought, I don't know, that'd be Jervis. He's very Jervis is very film literate,
Right.
because he's from an acting family.
Right.
So he's always grown up in film. And I think he did a study course on films as well at some point. So he's quite expert at this sort of
Oh, that's
thing.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I might have to see if he'd be up for a film club chat at some point himself.
Yeah, he would be very,
Right.
he'd be all over it, I think. Yeah. Star Wars, we've not talked about. Star Wars is kind of there in the background. I mean, I didn't particularly like Star Wars in terms of the imagery or the themes. I thought it was a cliche, but it was sort of Americans in space, good guys, bad guys cliche, with the Empire and a sort of yeah. It's very black and white, and that's its strength in a way, but it's not what 40k is about. 40k is very much not that. It's grey. It's everything's grey. Nothing's black, nothing's certain or black and white, and even things might be. It's the power. It's belief which is keeping things going. It's not knowledge. So I didn't really pick up a lot, but there was the odd thing you inevitably pick up in terms of your names or references and what have you. I think when we made some of the scenery, we took some sort of inspiration from some of that. I can't remember the name of the planet. The original planet they're on. They have these habitation pieces, which are
Tatooine.
Tatooine, yeah. They have like I think the family farm kind of thing. I think we made a few things that looked a bit like that because it's quite clever and quite like that. But at the same time, we were copying things we'd seen from Doctor Who or on TV, or Blake Seven, all the stuff we'd have seen as kids would have just been in there. It wouldn't have been something we'd been terribly conscious of. We'd referenced it.
Sure. There's a few Daleks like floating about in like Rogue Trader and stuff, aren't there as well?
Well, when I did the original manuscript, I'm sure there were Daleks and Cybermen in it because I was instructed by Brian to make sure that I did rules for everything we did, and at the time we actually did some Daleks and Cybermen on license. But when I went back to the book just to check that I wasn't talking rubbish, I couldn't find it. So I suspect that at the last minute somebody had taken it out.
Right.
But I thought it was in there. So
wow, yeah, it would have been canonized. The Doctor Who and 40k shared a setting.
A universe. Yeah. Yeah, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thing.
Yeah. Was there ever anything of like Star Trek in the mix for you?
I can't think of anything specific. Star Trek's again, it's very clean. It's like it's good guys, and there are almost no bad guys in Star Trek, are they? I mean, originally Klingons were, but they tidied them up, and even they weren't entirely evil. No, I don't think so. I think there's some ideas in the odd Star Trek episode where you've got either time travel, dimensions, the computers that are controlling everything, which just become part of, I wouldn't even say 40k lore, they become part of our culture, don't they?
Sure.
I mean, Richard Halliwell used to phone up Eastwood. I was working at Eastwood, and Hal would be, God knows where he'd be, somewhere else. And he'd phone up, and he'd say, and the reception would pick you up, and he'd go, "Can I speak to Captain Kirk?" And they'd put him through to me. Don't know why.
Well, at least they knew who Captain Kirk was. That's fun.
Well, yeah, but why? I've no idea. And why he asked for Captain Kirk and why they got through to me, which is who he wanted, I've no idea. But that was how. Yeah.
The only other one that you've mentioned to me before was a very specific entry in Rogue Trader in 40k, which is the bouncing ball.
Oh, yeah, I've forgotten about that.
Yeah.
That's from Darkstar.
Right.
Film Darkstar, which is a fantastic film. Very funny. And again, yeah, that's quite... it's not 40k, really, because I can't think of a single element in it that's 40k-like, apart from that bouncing ball that I thought was. It's a long comedy sequence in the film where this alien, which looks like a giant pumpkin, and bouncing around and being troublesome. And I think they eventually capture it and hit it with something, and it just deflates. And, and the gag is, it looks like a big balloon, and actually it is. But I think I borrowed that and put it in the monster section of the original Rogue Trader book. I don't think it's ever been done anything with it ever since.
Not that I'm aware of, no. But it's
I mean,
fun
some
that
of the
it's
things
there.
I put in subsequently got picked up on and turned into real things, like the Jacaro, which are sort of like an intelligent orangutan, were based on the orangutan Dave in Mega City 1.
Right.
Dave was elected mayor of Mega City 1 at some point in Judge Red Strip. And the reason I included it and invented Jacaro was because we had to have rules for everything we made, including all the Judge Dreds. That's why there are judges in 40k.
Right.
Yeah. And it's, yeah. So, yeah. Bizarre, the way these things.
Was
turn
there
out.
anything else? I mean, you mentioned 2000 AD. I know that's a comic, and Judge Dredd's a comic more than anything else.
Yep.
But like that feels like an influence across the board as well, just in terms
It's
of
a big
feel.
influence. 40k. I mean, 40k and 2000 AD. You're almost marching in lockstep at some points because remember, I mean, I've been reading 2000 AD since I was at school. It came out in 76, 77, somewhere around. Might have been 76. Anyway, right. I was definitely reading it when I was at school. I remember being in the school library with a copy. And then Star-Lord and 2000 AD merged. There were two rival comics. Star-Lord had the Strontium dog in it originally.
Right.
And me and Hal would buy it. Hal would often buy it, and I would just read it or borrow it. And it was, I don't know, there was something about it, particularly the Pat Mills stories. And Pat Mills was the editor, I think, but he also wrote some of this stuff. That was just chiming with the times, because this was the punk revolution, 1977. Suddenly, 1975. I think might be 1976. The NME band of the year was Racing Cars, who were a kind of soft rock band.
Right.
The next band, the band of the year, would be the Sex Pistols. It felt like that. It felt like the culture of the music culture, and to some extent, therefore, the alternative culture was sort of soft rock, prog rock. Bands like Yes, Rick Wakeman, they were always all great bands. Genesis, these were huge. And then suddenly punk rock happened, and so the whole culture, the whole youth culture, shifted into that kind of punk image.
Right.
Even if the music had probably less influence than people thought it might at the time.
Right.
It was a little bit three-chord wonder stuff. But that imagery, like the spiky hair, the pins through the nose, that became very influential. And 2000 AD picked up on a lot of that.
Right.
And Mad Max, it all stemmed from that kind of punk, we would refer to as punk, punk culture. And you go back and you look at all the pictures of those early punks with the bondage strides and the spiky blue hair and crazy stuff. I mean, that was exciting, and the imagery was picked up on, and I think we picked up on a lot of that. I mean, you look at Troll Slayers. That's what Troll Slayer is. A Troll Slayer is a dwarf punk,
right,
with a hair. I haven't got any more, so I can't do it. With spiked hair, rings through the nose and the chains and tattoos and covered in big axe chains. So I think when Hal did the Amazons for Warhammer, they were punks. You look at drawings in the John Blanche drawings in the some of the original journals and compendiums that had Amazon themed, Lustrian themed subjects. Yeah. The Amazons are all punks with sort of punk hairdos and spikes and things like that.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah,
it's fascinating. Yeah.
So that all played into it, but I don't think there's any direct film imagery there. There were a couple of kind of punk films back in the day, but I don't remember them being particularly. Yeah, I don't remember seeing any of them except as little clips. Yeah. Anyway, sure. So music has a bit of an influence as well.
I will give you a call when we start the Warhammer Sounds Club or Music Club or what have you. We can come back and continue that chat.
I'm a bit all over the place on music. I was a bit too old to be a punk, really, but I did buy quite a lot of the new wave records.
Right.
But 1977, I'd be 18, so I did go to some punk gigs and whatever. But I did have hair down to my waist as well, so
right.
I fitted in more with the denim punk, denim long hair kind of crowd.
What would you have been listening to around that time?
Beatles, Genesis, a bit. So I borrowed a whole bunch of records of Hal, a bit George Harrison, I remember, in those early days, things like that. And then when punk came along, I started buying punk records and going to gigs. I had a lot of the original Stiff Records releases,
right.
Including quite a lot of singles. We had a huge party sometime in the 80s round at our shared house in Nottingham, and a lot of my singles all disappeared, or they came, or the sleeves came back, but with different records in them, which I'm not very interested in. Yeah, John Otway, things like that.
Right.
But I had some quite rare and would be considered collectible singles, but damn. It was a singles period. There were albums, and Stiff did some compilation albums, which I've still got, which are great. But it was a period of singles, people doing their own singles. In fact, I think the band I was in when I was at Lancaster, very briefly, I played drums very badly. They did I think they actually cut a single later on, but it was I wasn't there, which was much to their advantage, I feel, because they could get someone else to play drums for them, or use a drum machine, which was just about coming out at the time. Something that could keep time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, I thought you were going to say for a second that there's a Rick Priestley single out there somewhere.
Probably not. For the best, I feel.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't have the stamina to be a drummer, really. I used to get knackered through that way through. Slowing down. Yeah.
Well, Rick, it has been lovely to chat, and thank you so much for taking the time to sort of explore just some of those influences or some of those things that were out there in pop culture that may have found their way in some form.
Well, there are things that were going on at the same time in some cases, and you think, well, yeah, who knows? But there are very, very few direct takes. I mean, as I say, I'm not really a huge film buff either. But Jervis Johnson, he's your man. Go and talk to him.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. It's been great.
Okay. Cheers, Jordan. Cheers, everyone.
Many thanks to Rick Priestley for joining me for this Warhammer Film Club special. Rick has actually written an exclusive guest post at patreon.com/Jordan Sorcery about the influences on Warhammer and 40k's creation. That's available to read right now. And the Warhammer Film Club returns with a new season in 2026.